I have played a lot of TCGs over the years, and while I don't play all of them because that would involve way too much effort and money, there is still... Hang on. I've done this before. In my last video I talked about the stuff of my favourite TCGs that I hated, so to bring balance to the force I'm going to talk about everything I like about them, under penalty of death. The card game was bad, then it was good. And an obligatory disclaimer, this is all my opinion and nothing but my opinion, and I'm not claiming my opinion to be fact, but rather stating my own thoughts and opinions. And I won't be explaining the rules on how to play any of these games unless needed to further my point. Yu-Gi-Oh! Is a game I wouldn't say anything nice about if there wasn't a gun to my head. But considering my current circumstances, Yu-Gi-Oh! Has something for everyone. They cater to every playstyle, every theme, every way to play online or in person. Just don't mention Time Wizard. Correct, the game is a contrived mess of rulings from the 1990s that did not account for modern cards and combos that we have today. But that shouldn't stop you from enjoying a game where you can play a deck with demons, dragons, vampires, furries, or the variety of flavors of anime women. However, if you do choose to play them, make sure to pick the ones that won't land you on a register. Not to mention that Yu-Gi-Oh! Has the best TCG simulators ever. Master Duel is one of, if not the best ways to experience a TCG online and can be easily played for free on anything with a screen. Dueling Book is by far and away the best way to practice for an in-person tournament and allows you to create custom cards, some of which aren't completely broken. If you still want access to all the cards but prefer an automatic simulator, then Omega and EDO Pro work best, the latter of which has literally every card to ever exist. And 11 different rule sets. It's all fun and games until I activate my Darkness/Trap D. Needless to say, if you have friends, and there is a niche-specific or incredibly stupid way you want to play Yu-Gi-Oh!, there is some community bollocks that will allow you to do it. This is my own format. I call it 40 of the same card. Please send help. Rush may not have the endless abyss of content that the original Yu-Gi-Oh! Had, but at least this game can be played by its intended audience without requiring a reading level on par with someone nearly 3 times their age. In every respect, Rush is still Yu-Gi-Oh!, but with a much lower skill floor, which isn't much of a challenge considering it was up against the one and only Duel Monsters, which has rulings that I'm not even sure the creators are aware of. Me entering the forming a cohesive sentence competition and seeing my opponent is Snow, Unlight of Dark World. Rush simultaneously succeeds at being both for children and for adults. The cards are readable, incredibly appealing, and condense everything down into a format that should have been the default 2 decades ago. Most importantly, of course, I love being able to understand the game state. Despite the veterans of the inferior game calling this baby's first Yu-Gi-Oh!, the game is incredibly complex. I know it doesn't look like it, but these monsters have committed crimes that Master Duel can only dream of. We have loops, pseudo-FTKs, and grass for you to touch, which immediately puts you ahead of most people who watch this channel. There is so much stuff in this game to mess around with that should not work, but I'm very glad that it does. Unfortunately, this game is exclusive to Eastern Asia, but with the power of EDO Pro, you too can experience triple white woman jump scare. The best thing about Hearthstone is that it's completely free to play. That's it. What more of an explanation do you really need? Despite some of the extortionate pricing, it is fully possible to obtain every card in the game without spending a single penny, and alongside how uncharacteristically generous Blizzard is with freebies, if you limit yourself to a handful of classes, it is incredibly easy to build multiple competitive decks within just a few hours. You could argue that it's possible to play competitively in a lot of major TCGs for free, and you'd be right. If your goal was to lose. Despite the fact that I just praised it, Master Duel has an incredibly greedy model where the majority of cards that make your deck function are ultra rares. Even some of the best archetypes in the game consist nearly entirely of ultra rares. Magic the Gathering Arena's UI was also entirely designed by a person who will never have to witness the atrocities that they have created. Meanwhile, in Hearthstone, everything is tidy, concise, and entire meta decks can be crafted for less dust than a single legendary card, meaning you still have plenty to snort while you try and figure out what the hell your opponent just did. Speaking of games that are easy to get into, Lorcana is so painfully simple that you could probably intuit the gameplay from simply looking at the cards. To put it simply, if you have played a card game before, you know how to play Lorcana. This may lead you to believe that the gameplay is about as stale as Queen Lizzie No. 2. Despite its simplicity, Lorcana somehow manages to have consistently interesting gameplay and cards that make for interesting decks, such as a deck about singing, the deck about poorly disguised furry players, and this bastard. As an added bonus, Lorcana prints every single one of its cards as a common, making them painfully easy to obtain. Even some of the strongest cards barely scratch double digits. But with the alternate art cards, it still gives you plenty of breathing room if you happen to want to flex your suspiciously wealthy furry status. My face when my opponent says he works in networking and whips out the max rarity Nick Wilde. Altered is the best TCG, so you'd be correct in assuming that it took me a while to figure out what I like best about it. But if I can get real for a moment, among the many reasons I love this this game, one of the main reasons is the diversity. Diversity is seen as a very tricky subject to tackle, so companies usually do a very poor job at subtly nudging it in, or in some cases, due to culture or laws, refuse to put certain forms of diversity in whatsoever. My favorite part of my culture is being racist. Usually you'll get one or two POC/LGBTQIA+ or other acronymed character per set. Ensure your representation. Altered does diversity in all forms without any of it feeling forced. All 4 of the Izmir heroes are people of color, and Bravos is incredibly representative of Asia. Speaking of Bravos, Atsadi and Sarah are both amputees, Sarah having mechanical legs similar to the legs used by Paralympic athletes, whereas Atsadi just keeps it that way because he's metal as fuck. Not to mention the diverse array of ages and body types, as we see with characters like Afanas, Tarun, and Fen. Auric could be seen as a representation of LGBT and trans identity, considering they use he/him outside of drag and she/her in drag. However, sometimes drag queens are just straight despite the heavy ties to the LGBT community. But Akesha! Big win for the lesbians. History will say they were good friends. Cast a spell to maneuver my mouth onto your mouth. They don't just do diversity well. I'd argue Altered does diversity the best out of any TCG on the market. Or off the market. Ashes Reborn is another example of an antisocial card game, but in a good way. I don't want to sit across the table from someone and never interact with them. I just don't want to sit across the table from someone. Single-player modes are something that is rarely tackled in the TCG market, as they made the mistake of believing that the people who play their game aren't all socially inept. Despite the usual way to play TCGs and by extension board games, there has been a rise of single-player modes for both. Red Rains manages to capture the feeling of fighting a boss in an RPG perfectly. Every turn the boss gets to roll a dice, and after enough successful rolls, they'll level up and get more dangerous, so stalling them out is likely going to end up getting you vored by a mini Jormungandr. This makes heroes like Leo Sunshadow completely unviable, so it's good by default. Each one of the bosses can be played at a normal difficulty or a heroic mode, and you can play either single player or co-op in case you do actually have friends. Let me know what that's like. The heroic mode does make the boss more brutal, increasing the number of actions they take or the amount of health they have. Of course, multiplayer scales in the same way, so a level 3 heroic multiplayer Virus takes 7 actions per turn, and at that point you've basically already lost. Just kind of hope that you have a knack for developing very specific kinks very quickly. Saving the best till last, and also because I wanted to at least somewhat mirror the previous video, Chaotic has lore, but unlike most lore where you have to do lame and boring things like read books, Chaotic tells you its story by the packs you open. Every character, every attack, every location, and every music spell plays some role in the story of the set that you open. To put this all into context, there are 4 factions and they all hate each other. Many of the cards have the keyword loyal, meaning they can only run it in decks where all characters are of the same faction. Give it a couple of sets and we see the rise of the 5th faction, whose main goal is to enslave the entire planet. The show suggests that they do this through the water, but with a name like Ani, it sounds more like they do it through VTubing. While everyone hates each other, they all collectively agree that they would rather be free to hate each other than be slaves in a hive mind, and for the most part, collectively decide to kill their anime waifu overlord. Of course, not everyone likes the idea of unity, and some believe that their faction is superior and can solve this issue on their own, so the loyal keyword becomes more of an indicator of racism. Another new mechanic that was introduced with the new faction was that some cards have brainwashed text. As long as you controlled a chieftain, these cards will be treated as a different tribe and have different effects, such as the famous Hearthstone streamer Rarin. Except Felthorpe. He was just evil from the beginning. No one suspected that there was an imposter among us, except those with basic observational skills. To add even more flavor to this incredible method of storytelling, the legend cards are created, cards which gain you effect based on the different tribes you control. Goram gives all of your living creatures elemental powers based on the tribes of the already dead ones. Tangrath has Defender and gains even more buffs for each tribe. He's also Barafuribait. Brant K buffs all of your creatures on your turn, and Barath is still racist. He's just more inclusive about it. The best example of this storytelling is between the sisters Avena and Nivena, one a disciplined warrior and the other Big Titty Goth GF. Originally, they hated each other and were total opposites. With their new cards later in the story, not only do they resolve their differences, but their powers also get stronger if they're the only monsters left on your field. This lore puts the dual terminal story to shame, which really wasn't difficult, but bar was in hell, honey. Of course, none of these games are perfect, but they come pretty damn close to it. I've left links in the description to where you can find all of these games and try them out completely for free online, because we both know after the last purchase you made for that deck that you'll stop playing after a month, you haven't got any cash to spare.